Hey guys, one of the Mediocre Commentators here, and after watching the first Thor film from 2011, I watched Thor the Dark World, and it changed my opinion on the last film and on Ragnarok because of what the film does and how it kind of affects this whole Thor arc they have going through the first three films, which will probably lead into Love and Thunder too. But I have to say the film does have a lot going on, and it succeeds in a lot and fails on a lot, and let's get into it. I was writing and thinking about the film after I watched it. I didn't necessarily like where I was with it, so I decided to watch it again. After you watch the film a second time, you know all the beats it's gonna hit. And the first time I watched it, which I had seen it when it came out in 2014, but I still I knew the main story beats, but all the small things that happen, like the subplots or the smaller minor story details, I didn't quite remember that well. And when I knew those, the film wasn't as fun as the first time I watched it. Can I say that it's better than the last Thor film? In some instances, it is better. I'm not gonna lie. But overall, I can't say it's a better film, and it's kind of a lot weaker than its brother. The Dark World mainly stars all the same cast and characters from the last film, except it introduces the new villain Malekith and the Dark Elves. It also introduces the most important MCU character of all time, Ian the Intern, who essentially is a male version of Kat Dennings' character. And trust me, we could all use more of that Kat Dennings comedic brilliance. The film also had a very troubled past of getting made. Marvel wanted Kenneth Branagh to come back, who directed the first film, but Marvel wanted to release this film in a smaller time frame in under 2 years from when the last one was released. And Branagh spent a long time on that first Thor film, so they could not get him back. And then Patty Jenkins was actually attached to direct. Jenkins wanted a more mythic and romantic Thor story to dealing with Loki and a different villain, I believe, and Jane Foster is more integrated into the story a little better. She was a bigger part of the script. But after the writers started writing the script a few times, Jenkins didn't like where it was going, and she eventually just left the project. Especially when things like the Ether and the Dark Elves were introduced, Jenkins just did not like it. So then, Marvel sought out to hire Alan Taylor, who directed a couple episodes of The Sopranos, some of the good episodes of The Game of Thrones. Hey, and he even got the opportunity to direct a big franchise Hollywood film, Terminator Genesis. Oh, God! Now I see why he literally hasn't directed a feature film since 2015. It all makes sense now. However, the good thing about Alan Taylor is he doesn't use the damn Dutch angle lens, and I thank God for it. Which is why I think this movie is a bit more grander with its action scenes, and the action is filmed so much better than the last Thor. And I think that's one of the standouts of this movie, which I'll get into in a little bit. Also, this film benefits from having mostly just the same characters and only having to introduce a villain, and that's it. It keeps Thor and Jane and Eric Selvig and Loki and Odin and the Asgard. So it doesn't have to introduce a lot, and it allows it more to focus on the emotion and the characters better than setting up this world and setting up these gods and mythical things that happen in this universe. I would say I did enjoy this film, but it's not a film that I would say that has a super high rewatch value. It might be because I watched it on a back to back in a span of 48 hours, but the action and the stakes in this movie are severely diminished once you know how the story will play out and what will happen with all the characters. Film also has a large sense of surprise and spectacle, and when that surprise is gone, the film loses a bit of its touch. But it's still quite fun to watch this crazy plot unfold with all these twists and turns. This is a movie where a lot happens, and if I were to go into depth, it would take me a long time to explain this movie. But if I were to do a short summary, I could just say Thor flies around with Jane Foster, battles a pale dude with pointy ears, and his mom dies. That's pretty much it, which I guess you could also say that Thor learns to persevere through the troubles and protect the people he loves and love the ones that are close to you. But you could say he kind of learned that in the last film, but he didn't learn to persevere because no one really major died. But you could also say he lost Loki, so like there's that. Because he lost Loki in the last film, so it's not a big step to say, well, he loses his mom in this film. It's not a huge drop off. There's not a lot going underneath the surface of this film's emotion. Even though Thor does go through a lot of pain and a lot of trauma throughout the film, the fact that he is able to persevere isn't really highlighted in this film that well. Like I said, Thor loses his mother and his brother, he thinks, to the Dark Elves, who kill them and like half of Asgard, I think. And I think that's the The most logical step in Thor's progression for this movie would be to have him deal with the loss of his mother or his father or his brother once and for all. I feel like that's a good arc for him. And for him to deal with the loss of the two out of his four most important people in his life, that being his mom, Loki, Odin, and Jane Foster, I feel like that's a logical step to take. Now, the movie doesn't go as deep as I would want it to with all its themes and its more complex subject matter, and it's more concerned with being a blockbuster summer movie than anything else. I really wish the film was more focused on the drama and the seriousness of these situations, rather than 3 scenes after Thor and Loki's death. Kat Jennings is making dick jokes on the side. Like I don't want that in my Thor film. Especially with these jokes of Eric Selvig, like walking around naked. Like, I mean, I guess it's kind of funny, but it's also just really weird at the same time. And it's just, I don't know. Couldn't you think of something better than this? However, when the drama does set in this movie, like when Thor's mom Frigga dies, it is done extremely well. And I'm not really caught off guard with the emotion, like it didn't swell me up or anything, but it's a good scene. And you see Odin laying with his wife, and Thor is just angry, and where they put her on a boat, light the boat on fire at sea, and the boat just keeps floating over the waterfall. I think it's a really good scene. It's really well done. It's like the drama's good in this film when it hits home. But the thing about it is, they don't hold on the emotion long enough. Like when she dies, I feel like they should have held on Thor and Odin grieving over her as she died in the moment. I feel like you need to hold on that more or show us more emotion. They don't really say a lot. That bothers me. Let the emotion set in. Stop breezing over it because this film feels like it has to get to the next action scene as quick as possible. You don't have to do that. Let the emotion set in. Compared to the last film, it doesn't really live up to expectation. The last film was filled to the brim with emotion and drama, and the action followed that up because the emotion was so gripping and you really felt for Thor and hoped he would get out of those situations and be able to find peace between his dysfunctional family. But Thor in this movie, it kind of just feels like something he has to do more than something he wants to do. So I guess you could say Thor's arc isn't very well done, but the ideas that they had for his arc are incredible. I do just wish they expanded on them a little more than the movie actually did. With that saying, I think it's done fine. It's not spectacular, but it's fine for a Marvel movie and a comic book film. I know I didn't talk much about Jane Foster when I talked about the last film, but that character just does not resonate with me much at all. She feels very bland, like she was just sloppily written, like I don't understand why she was so badly written. And the same goes for her in this film. The writer specifically made up a reason for her to be in this movie. What is that reason? Well, let me tell you. She wanders into this weird area, and the ether gets caught up in her bloodstream. And the reason she is taken with Thor everywhere, to Asgard and the Dark World, or wherever the hell they go, is because she has the big, bad, powerful liquid that the evil, pale albino elf wants. So she just walks around and acts distressed and makes weird jokes the entire movie. And the only point in her being there is for her to hold the power that the Dark Elves want. And really, that's why Thor's in this story, because he brought Jane Foster to Asgard. If he never went to find Jane Foster in Asgard might be fine. His mother might be alive. I'm sorry, but that's just bad screenwriting. It's like they forced her to be in the climax too. Like the only thing she does in the climax is have these weird scientific things that help Thor win this battle against Malekith. So you just kind of have her like cutting back to her saying weird jokes and stuff like that. It's just, I really hope she's written better in Love and Thunder because this is not it. I can tell you that. Also, why is she in the for? Just because, I guess? Because they never explain it in the film. And the fact that she doesn't have a character arc or motivation or anything is baffling to me. On top of it, the romance they have with Thor just doesn't make any sense. And their chemistry is just not good. And the writers don't know how to write it. Especially in like this awkward scene. I don't know if the writers were trying to be funny or not, but it came across as the funniest damn thing I've ever seen because it's just so damn awkward. Like, I'm going to say it's funny, they're trying to be funny, but if they weren't, I would totally believe that they're trying to write serious lines and it's just coming across really sad and awkward.
I believe that fate brought us together. Jane, I don't know where you were or what happened, but I do know this. I know
You do?
Do what?
What? Hey!
Oh, good, we get to talk about Loki. Loki steals the show in this movie, just like the last movie, just like the Avengers, just like any Marvel movie he's in. He isn't in the movie that much, except for the second act, pretty much, which is where he really gets to shine. However, he does have a great scene early on with his mother talking to him in his cell. And the "he is not my father" line from Hiddleston is great. You can really feel the anguish in his voice and what his mother says back to him. It's really good emotion, really good drama. It reminds me of that last film, which is what I want more of.
What of the lives you took on Earth?
A mere handful compared to the number that Odin has taken himself.
Your father...
He's not my father!
Then am I not your mother?
You're not.
And he really does feel like the god of mischief in this movie, especially when like Thor breaks him out and they're walking to where they need to get to, and Loki essentially just annoys the living hell out of Thor by changing who he is to like different guards and people. Especially when he turns into Captain America. That's probably one of the funniest scenes in the MCU today. I really love seeing Chris Evans play Loki, play Captain America. That's fun. I like when actors get to play another person playing another person. Also, the twist when Loki pretends to cut off Thor's hand and trick Malekith feels extremely real. When I first saw the film, I was like, oh, well, Thor just got his hand cut off. And I almost believed it when I saw it a couple days ago, but I knew it wasn't real because I'd seen the movie before. But still, it seemed very real. It was a good moment in the film. Hiddleston really makes you believe everything he is saying and doing in that scene. And when Loki is eventually killed by one of the Dark Elves, it's really emotional. And it's hard for us as an audience to see a character like Loki die doing something heroic because it's what we always wanted him to be. Even if we know he really isn't actually dying because he's a master of illusions. And do you really think Loki's going to get killed by some faceless, nameless asshole? Like, no, he's not going to go out like that. We all know that. But the line, "I didn't do it for him," felt like something Loki meant and shows signs of him growing as a character, to what we will eventually see at the beginning of Infinity War and at the end of Thor Ragnarok. And Thor holding his brother as he dies is really powerful, and the emotion in that moment of the sadness and the anger for it really shows a lot for this character.
I'll tell Father what you did here today.
I didn't do it for him.
Also, bringing it back around to the first Thor movie, I felt like a lot more in the scene where Odin tells Loki the truth about who he really is than when Loki supposedly died in this film. It just shows that the script seems to be a lot tighter and focused on smaller themes and subjects. When the Dark World tries to focus on all this stuff about persevering and loss and rekindling old relationships, when it should just, if it just tightened up a few of these script ideas, I feel like it could be a really solid film. But instead, the original Thor movie just kind of does everything this movie is doing better in a way. The movie wants to be this big, grand spectacle. And while it is big and grand and it looks beautiful, and the emotion and motivations behind the spectacle don't always add up to what you're wanting, and you're not feeling what the movie wants you to feel for the characters as much as you should. But let's talk about the action. The action and the cinematography in this film takes centerfold on the positives. The way this movie is shot with the big wides and the action scenes taking place during the day, which is where I think most of Thor's action scenes should be, because we can see everything, and you can see all the lasers and the action and the swords and the hammers. It's really awesome, and it's filmed in a way to where you can really see what's going on, and the action feels real. This is especially evident in the attack on Asgard scenes. Malekith essentially takes the Dark Elves and these ships to attack Asgard and find the Ether, especially when the first ship shows up and Heimdall like springs into action and jumps on this ship and takes it down with like a sword and explodes on impact. And then you just see his shadow come over him and this big ship comes behind him with tens of other ships. It's really cool to see all that attack on Asgard because you don't really think of Asgard as a place that could go under attack and that could be taken down, but these elves have that presence. and you feel a little bit of anxiety in these scenes. And when Thor springs into action, you can see this beautiful wide of him flying, kind of like the scene in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness when he is at the wedding and spins his handkerchief out of his pocket and gets the cape on and the Doctor Strange getup on. It kind of gave me vibes of that. At least that's something recent that I can compare it to. And when Thor is throwing down against these elves, it feels like a god laying waste to these mortal-like creatures because Thor just seems so powerful, and the weight of his hammer and the cinematography of it all is extremely well done to almost a point of perfection. The action feels more real in this movie while also feeling more comic book because of the cinematography of these fights. The only negative I would say about the action is I don't feel much tension in most of the fights. That's less about the Asgard action scenes than the final battle, which sucks because the final battle should be something that is tension filled and that's cool and that Thor should feel like he can't win these fights possibly. But at no point did I think Thor wasn't going to win this fight against Malekith or the Dark Elves. Thor seems to destroy everything in this path and doesn't seem to have too much trouble taking out the Dark Elves. And especially in the attack on Asgard, I believe if Thor is just fighting Malekith one-on-one, I think Thor would kill Malekith in a millisecond, and I don't think he would struggle with defeating him whatsoever. I don't think he has trouble fighting Malekith even when he has the Ether, the all-powerful Infinity Stone at the end of the film. However, the sequences are fun to watch, especially the attack on Asgard battle. It's really fun to watch. The final battle, while tensionless, it still is decently entertaining to watch. The fight scenes are a lot more fun to me than Thor walking around on Earth, not having social skills and saying weird things. I want to see Thor and Asgard talking to gods, fighting gods, having these conversations. I think that's more interesting than the first film, which is it's kind of better than the first film in a way. Also, the death of Malekith is also very odd. He kind of just like gets transported to the Dark World, and a ship just falls on top of him, and I presume it crushes him to death. But the weird part is he lets out a small as he dies. And it's just very odd to me. Like, why would you do that? It's just a weird thing to do, a weird direction to take, in my opinion. Now that I think about it, there are a lot of weird things that happen in this film, or just weird things that people say in general. Like, Odin in this movie is just kind of an asshole for no reason whatsoever.
All this because Loki desires a throne.
It is my birthright.
Your birthright was today!
Throughout the entire film, he is talking to Loki when he's being imprisoned. And he's just yelling like a maniac. I'm like, why are you being an asshole? There's no need to be a weird man. I don't understand what your deal is. Also, he's kind of an asshole through all the Thor films, if you really think about it. First one wasn't that asshole-ish. This film, he's an asshole throughout the entire time. He's an asshole at the beginning to Loki, which I kind of understand. I'll give him that. But he's an asshole to Thor for this plan he has about defeating the Dark Elves, and I was just like, we shall fight and die. And I'm like, why are you so stupid? You stupid ass is what you are. You're a stupid, stupid ass. Anyways, the humor in this film is also very, very strange at times to me. Some of it's great, like Thor putting his hammer on a coat rack. It doesn't make sense. It's just funny to see him do that. Or that funny guy that's on a date with Jane Foster at the beginning. I swear I know that guy from something. Oh, he's the bad guy from Gulliver's Travels. I knew it! But then there's weird comedy with Eric Selvig going naked, like I said earlier, just going to a psych ward. I'm like, where? Why? It's so out of character, so odd. It does not fit in this movie. Also, like in the original Thor, Kat Dennings in this film. It sucks. Totally unfunny. Not funny at all. She ruins the tone so many times. I'm so glad she was cut from these films. And like the final battle scene, a lot of that is just her saying things that aren't funny. And there's a whole bit with her and the intern guy. It goes on for like a minute and a half, and it's just not funny. It's just not funny at all. I wish they would have cut some of this comedy from the film, or at least write better comedy. But all in all, I had fun with this movie. The action is a lot improved, but the story beats just don't entirely work for me, and the build-up for these big emotional moments, they don't pay off like I want them to. Thor: The Dark World has also made me learn to love the first Thor film a lot more because of how good the emotion in that film is. Even if some of the build-up isn't awesome, some of the build-up is great, some of it's just kind of lame in ways. And the action isn't as fun as this film. But The Dark World does have some serious story issues. Some of the characters get on my nerves quite a bit. But I still think it's a fun movie to watch if you haven't seen it in a while. If you watched it like a month ago, like 6 months ago, don't revisit it. It's exactly how you think it is. First, I'm going to give the original Thor a 7.5 out of 10, and I'm going to give Thor the Dark World a 6 out of 10. I'm changing the original score because I think this movie made me love the original Thor more because of what this film could have been. In some ways, it's better than the last movie, but the story and the emotional beats that the original Thor had, it's hard to beat, and the villain is miles better than Malekith. But let me know what you guys thought, and if it was better or worse, and keep a lookout for a Thor Love and Thunder review. I'm going to try and have the Ragnarok review out this week or sometime next week, but look out for the Thor Love and Thunder review sometime this time next week. All right, I'll see you guys in the next one.